So in case you've been living under a rock today, you probably know that President Trump declared the ceasefire over, but there's a lot more details about what has taken place in the last 12 to 24 hours or so. We're going to get right into it. We're going to start off with a clip of President Trump speaking at the NATO summit. So let's just go right to it.
Is the ceasefire over? Is the ceasefire done? Is the MOU dead?
It's a very interesting question. To me, I think it's over. I don't want to deal with them anymore. They're scum. You know what scum is? They're scum. They're sick people. They're led by sick people. And they're vicious, violent people. And if they had a nuclear weapon, they'd use it. As far as I'm concerned, it's over. I'll speak to our negotiators. They want to negotiate. They're good people. Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner. But they have to come back to me. As far as I'm concerned, it's just a waste of time dealing with them. They're liars. We make a deal. And if I make a deal with him, we have a deal. And he goes out, he talks. We make a deal. Everyone's agreed. No nuclear weapon. We make a deal. They go outside, talk to the press. They say, we never even talked about it. There's something wrong with them. They're cuckoo. As far as I'm concerned, it's over.
All right, before I go on with more of this clip, let's just reflect on what he just said there. First of all, he points out that Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff want to keep negotiating because they're such good people, but that he believes that it's a waste of time. This is refreshing to hear, that President Trump is not buying all the nonsense. Also, when he brings up the fact that, like he says, we make an agreement and then they go out and deny it, this reminds us of what J.D. Vance said, what was it, about a week ago, where in an interview, he said, it's a little curious, this strange thing about the Iranians that, we're having peace negotiations and then they claim there aren't any negotiations. It's this weird thing about them that they deny what's actually being negotiated. And we also had, this goes all the way back to Witkoff before the war saying that President Trump is a little, we're a little bit confused. Why aren't they capitulating? A failure to understand how the Iranians work. You see, for some reason, it got into the heads of a lot of these Americans that when the Iranians say one thing in a closed door negotiating room, and then they say something else publicly, that what they say publicly is just performative and not meant to be taken seriously, but the real thing is what we have behind closed doors. Think about how many times President Trump has said over the last month or so, we have a deal, they've agreed to almost everything, they've agreed they're not going to have a nuclear weapon. I don't think he's a liar with those things. He doesn't want to make himself look like a fool. I believe that they actually say behind closed doors one thing and they say something else in public. But for some reason, in the minds of these Americans and in the Westerners, in the minds of a lot of people, what they say publicly is just performative and not meant to be taken seriously. And what they say privately is the real thing. And I said this last week, I said they have it exactly backwards. It's what they say behind closed doors in those negotiating rooms that's not meant to be taken seriously. That's what they're not being real about. And that's a bit of it's nice to see President Trump on the right page here. That was very important, very refreshing to hear that he believes that the ceasefire is over, that the MOU is over. And it seems like he's seeing things clearly, but we'll have to see where this goes.
These talks won't resume after we get through the funeral proceedings. Does this mean that talks with Iran will not resume?
I don't care. They can talk, but I think they're wasting their time. They're a bunch of lying guys. My whole life, that's all I do is deals. My whole life that's how I became president, I guess. That's a deal too, right? But I made a lot of money. I had a lot of great success, tremendous success. Everything I did, I was successful. And I deal with these guys and I say, this is from a different school. They're liars. They're cheats. They're sick people. They've hurt their people. They killed 54,000 people as of now that were protesting. When people say, how come they haven't taken over? They can't take over because they're dead. They killed them. Nobody's going to take over. They have no guns, and the other side has machine guns. And they're killing them. The press doesn't report it. But
this was also a very interesting statement where President Trump comments on how the Iranian people haven't been able to take over the government because they don't have weapons. And he hasn't brought up that type of regime change thing in a long time. He's been talking about how there's reasonable people to talk to. You see that he's had a change of heart in the last little while. Remember how for all these last couple of months, there's been some frustration on our side. Like he keeps talking about them as though they're reasonable people. Now he's dropped that, and he's also talking about the Iranian people again in this comment. I don't know if this is just a one-off, but it's something to watch in the days ahead. Is rhetoric about the Iranian people taking the regime, which we haven't heard from Trump since the beginning of the war, is that going to be coming back? Something to watch for.
Bad people. They're bad people. And frankly, I don't want to waste my time with them. Now, I'll let our wonderful negotiators keep talking if they want, but I don't see it. I don't like these people. You know that? I like him. I like the leaders. I think all of these leaders.
Great. And they love.
I think they didn't treat the United States fairly for many years, but that's okay. But they're sane, rational, good people. Most of them. I don't like a couple of them, to be honest with you. But there are a couple I don't like much. But I like Erdogan. I'll tell you, I like President Erdogan.
Okay, we'll deal with the Erdogan issue in another video. There's a lot going on with Turkey, and I don't want to get bogged down in that right now. But bottom line here is President Trump says the ceasefire is over. So what has that led to? What it's led to is strikes going back and forth. IRGC says retaliatory strikes hit 85 U.S. military targets, MQ-9 drone downed. This is from IRNA. This is regime media, Islamic Republic News Agency. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps has announced that it launched an initial retaliatory operation against a U.S. attack targeting 85 points of key American military facilities in the West Asia region. In a statement issued early Wednesday, the IRGC Public Relations Office said the assault came after a violation of the Iran-U.S. Memorandum of Understanding, and the Iranian forces conducted the fresh attacks. Following the glorious funeral procession in Iran and Iraq for the martyred leader of the Islamic Revolution, Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei, the U.S., facing mounting failures, perceived the massive public mobilization as a major defeat and once again moved to breach its agreements, according to the statement. It said that the United States violated the ceasefire and the Islamabad understanding by carrying out an air attack in the early hours of Wednesday on several coastal bases and non-military stations in the coastal areas of Hormozgan province and Mashhad. The statement added the IRGC naval and aerospace forces responded in a joint missile and drone operation, striking 85 locations linked to important U.S. military installations in Bahrain's Salman Port and 5th Naval District, as well as Ali Al Salam Air Base in Kuwait. Okay, we'll make note of those two locations. We'll talk about them a little bit more in a moment. The IRGC also said it shot down an enemy MQ-9 drone that had attempted to interfere with the operation. Separately, IRGC spokesperson Brigadier General Hossein Mobini said a U.S. MQ-9 drone was brought down over the skies of Hormuz in Bushehr province. He said the aircraft was hit by IRGC air defense following the U.S. air incursion at dawn. Now, this is from Defense Security Asia website. U.S. strikes more than 80 Iranian military targets as Tehran announces retaliatory missile and drone attacks on bases in Bahrain and Kuwait. Notice they're only attacking sites in Bahrain and Kuwait. We'll get to that shortly as well. The fragile Islamabad MOU that had temporarily reduced direct hostilities between the U.S. and Iran appeared to fracture dramatically after Washington launched a new wave of precision strikes against military targets in southern Iran, prompting Tehran to announce retaliatory missile and drone operations against American military facilities across Bahrain and Kuwait. According to the U.S. military, more than 80 Iranian military objectives were struck during the operation, including air defense systems, command and control infrastructure, coastal surveillance networks, anti-ship missile positions, and dozens of Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps naval craft operating around the Strait of Hormuz. That's what they're hitting. Let me say it again. Air defense systems, command and control infrastructure, coastal surveillance, anti-ship missile positions, and naval craft. Now, what this means is that we have not gone back. If this is what they're hitting, then we have not gone back to the beginning of the war, to the wholesale bombing of regime targets, the kind of bombing we were seeing from February 28th until April 8th when it was stopped, when Israel was in there as well. We haven't gone back to that. This is all targets that appear to be designed to open up the Strait of Hormuz at this stage. Washington described the strikes as a direct response to attacks on commercial shipping transiting the Strait of Hormuz, arguing that Iranian actions threaten one of the world's most strategically important maritime energy corridors and therefore required immediate military action to restore deterrence. Notice, this isn't we're resuming the war, we're taking down the regime. That's not what it's saying. They refer to it as a response to attacks on shipping. Okay, so this is still about the Strait of Hormuz, just so that we keep everything clear in terms of what the stated current objectives are. The way Trump was talking, it sounds much more expansive than that. He didn't even mention the Strait of Hormuz in that clip I showed you, where he talked about it, the ceasefire being over and there's no point negotiating anymore. But this statement out of Washington about what the attacks were for make it sound like they're still just trying to open the strait. Now, I want to jump down and talk about the locations that were hit. Okay, here. Among the facilities specifically identified by Iranian officials, as I read to you from the Iranian media, were the U.S. Navy's 5th Fleet Headquarters at Naval Support Activity Bahrain in Mina Salman, Sheikh Issa Air Base in Bahrain, and Ali Al Salam Air Base in Kuwait, all of which represent critical pillars of America's Gulf Force posture. Okay, this is why I went to this website. This is a defense and security website. They talk more, this website gives more detail about what is happening at the defense and security level. So down in the middle of this article, it's a very long article. I'm not going to read all of it. I'm not even going to read most of it. Why Bahrain's 5th Fleet Headquarters and Ali Al Salam Air Base sit at the center of America's Gulf Force posture. These are the sites that the Iranian regime, although they said they hit like 80, over 80 sites, in their press release in IRNA, it also appeared in Tasnim, in their press kit about what they hit, they made mention of these 2 sites. The facilities identified in Iranian statements, including the U.S. Navy's 5th Fleet Headquarters at Naval Support Activity Bahrain and Ali Al Salam Air Base in Kuwait, represent 2 of the most strategically significant nodes supporting U.S. power projection, maritime security operations, and integrated regional deterrence across the Middle East. Naval Support Activity Bahrain serves as the headquarters of the U.S. 5th Fleet and U.S. Naval Forces Central Command, directing naval operations across the Arabian Gulf, the Gulf of Oman, the Red Sea, and portions of the Arabian Sea, while supporting multinational maritime security coalitions protecting critical commercial shipping routes. The 5th Fleet's operational responsibilities extend beyond conventional naval warfare because its command architecture integrates ballistic missile defense, intelligence fusion, maritime domain awareness, expeditionary logistics, mine countermeasure operations, and carrier strike group coordination through one of the world's most strategically contested maritime theaters. Any disruption to communications, command and control systems, or logistical infrastructure supporting the 5th Fleet could temporarily complicate operational coordination across multiple maritime task forces, although military officials have not indicated that current operations have suffered any significant degradation, meaning it's not that the Iranians were necessarily successful in these attacks, but this is what they're trying to hit. Ali Al Salam Air Base, that's the one in Kuwait, performs an equally important role within U.S. Central Command by supporting strategic airlift, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance missions, aerial refueling operations, rapid force deployment, and sustainment activities connecting American military operations across Southwest Asia. Rather than functioning as a traditional combat fighter base alone, Ali Al Salam operates as a critical logistics and mobility hub whose ability to sustain continuous air operations directly influences the responsiveness of American forces positioned throughout the Gulf region during periods of heightened military tension. And then they make a comment. Iran's decision to publicly identify these facilities, therefore, carries strategic significance beyond immediate military effects because the selection of targets communicates an intention to challenge the operational architecture underpinning American regional force posture rather than focusing exclusively upon symbolic retaliation. That is why I pulled up this piece. In other words, here you have Iran saying that they've hit like 80 plus 85 U.S. military targets, but they identify 2 of them by name. They identify the 5th Fleet Naval Base in Bahrain and the air base, the Ali Al Salam Air Base in Kuwait. And here in this article, here in Defense and Security Asia article, we see why these are, what this signals, that this is not Iran doing a tit for tat. They are trying to, with these strikes, they're trying to go for, something that will cripple the American ability to operate everything that they're doing in the Gulf. That doesn't mean it's successful, but that's what they're pointing out here. Now, Trump, this just came out literally like an hour ago. Trump, U.S. attack Karg Island last night, may reinstate blockade of Iranian ports. U.S. President Donald Trump says he may reinstate the American blockade of Iranian ports in what would mark a further collapse of the Memorandum of Understanding. That, quote, they may put down the blockade, we may put it back. It'll only be a blockade for Iran. Anybody else can have whatever they want, Trump tells reporters. As part of the MOU, the U.S. agreed to lift the blockade. Trump is asked again about another U.S. attack on Iran tonight, and he says he'll probably give the go-ahead and has no problem saying so publicly because there's not a thing they can do about it. While he's previously claimed that the U.S. has knocked out Iran's navy, he now says Tehran still has small boats that are dropping mines in the Strait of Hormuz. He again claimed that the U.S. is holding off on attacking civilian infrastructure sites in Iran, but that he could authorize their targeting as well. And then he talks about Karg Island. He says, maybe we'll take over Karg Island. He wonders aloud, there may be a big attack and it'll knock out a lot of stuff. Trump says Iran asked for a timeout from negotiations in order to hold funeral proceedings for the slain supreme leader. He says they also asked that we not kill them during the funeral. He called on Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth to detail what was hit in last night's attack on Iran. Hegseth said targets included the boats Iran was using to harass vessels in the Strait of Hormuz, underground missile and drone storage sites, and radar systems. And he made no mention of Karg Island. Hegseth didn't mention it. Anyway, so that's what happened literally just in the last couple of hours. Now, Karg Island is a big deal, obviously. That's the main storage facility for the Iranian oil. Some upwards of 80 to 90% of the Iranian oil flows through Karg Island. Trump said a couple weeks ago that taking Karg Island, he didn't think the American people had a stomach for it because it might, actually take Karg Island might require American casualties, and I'm not sure he's willing to go there. But this is a significant escalation if they're actually talking about taking or attacking Karg Island. Okay. Now let's look at the diplomatic side of what's happened here in terms of the Gulf states, because this, I think, is an interesting plot. Oman condemns attacks on Bahrain and Kuwait. Now remember who Oman is in this. Oman is the slippery player in this whole thing. In the saga that we've witnessed over the last couple of months, as you well know, Oman has been kind of doing a dance with Iran about maybe charging fees. Remember, they were mentioned explicitly in the Memorandum of Understanding, in the clause about the Strait of Hormuz, that they would work out the management of the Strait of Hormuz together with Iran. And then there was all these rumors that they were colluding with Iran to start charging fees. And then the Gulf states got upset at them. And then they went to the Gulf States Summit with Marco Rubio. The Omanis were also there and signed on to the declaration that there won't be any fees. So other Gulf states have been looking at Oman kind of suspiciously throughout this time. So Oman jumps at the head of the pack and condemns the attacks on Bahrain and Kuwait. Muscat, the Sultanate of Oman, has condemned the military attacks targeting the territories of the Kingdom of Bahrain and the state of Kuwait, as well as the attacks on 2 Saudi and Qatari commercial vessels in the Strait of Hormuz. A statement by the Foreign Ministry on Wednesday said that Oman reaffirms its solidarity with the 2 countries in all efforts to safeguard their security, stability, protect their sovereignty and territorial integrity, and preserve their national interests. The Sultanate of Oman also stressed that the escalating military tensions in the region pose a serious threat to regional security, maritime safety, the uninterrupted flow of international trade, and global energy supplies. Oman reiterated its firm rejection of any actions that undermine the security of states or endanger civilian and commercial shipping. It also called on all parties to exercise maximum restraint and de-escalate, promote peace. Okay, so they want to make it very clear whose side they're on. And what happened today? Look at this. In the midst of all of this, today, now just remember, Saudi Arabia and Oman are next to each other. They border each other. And this is from today, from this afternoon. Saudi foreign minister meets counterpart in Oman to discuss regional developments. Saudi Minister of Foreign Affairs, Prince Faisal bin Farhan, arrived in Muscat on Wednesday to discuss regional developments with his Omani counterpart. Prince Faisal was received by Oman's foreign minister, and the Saudi ambassador to the Sultanate of Oman was also there. Both ministers will discuss ways to enhance bilateral relations between the two brotherly countries and to address opportunities and prospects for joint cooperation. This is in a Saudi media outlet. This is in Arab News. So you see that there's obviously some conversations taking place between the Saudis and the Omanis, not only because we have a headline, but you see what's happening here. Saudi ships got attacked over the course of the last couple of days. That's what, this latest breakdown. Oh, I talked about this, I think, yesterday, that Saudi ships were attacked. We have the Omanis condemning what Iran is doing. And the Saudi foreign minister goes to Oman to talk things over with them. They need to make sure that the Omanis are on the right side of this and are playing ball. Because those Saudi ships were attacked going through the Omani route on the Omani side of the Strait of Hormuz where Iran was attacking them. And it could be maybe the Saudis, maybe the other Gulf states, the Qataris, maybe they're not so happy with Oman's response or lack of pushback against the Iranians as the Iranians attack ships passing through the Omani southern route. Just a thought. Gulf Arab states condemn latest Iranian attacks. This is also in Arab News, the same Saudi outlet. The Kuwaitis on Wednesday condemned the latest Iranian attack, describing Tehran's military actions as a continuation of brazen aggression. The security of the state of Kuwait, its sovereignty, the safety of its citizens and residents on its soil are a red line that cannot be crossed. Okay, so Jordan issued a similar condemnation of the brutal Iranian attacks against Kuwait, describing them as a flagrant violation of Kuwait's sovereignty. Qatar also condemned the repeated Iranian attacks on Bahrain and Kuwait. Okay, so everyone's condemning it. Egypt also condemned the repeated Iranian attacks. Right? Egypt emphasizes its full rejection of all actions. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps said it carried out a joint missile and drone operation against Ali al-Salam Air Base. Talks about that. And then all the way at the bottom, Anwar Gargash, the diplomatic advisor to the UAE president, has commented that Iran's attacks on Qatari and Saudi commercial tankers in the Strait of Hormuz and repeated aggression against our sisterly Bahrain and Kuwait are a clear indicator that Tehran remains incapable of committing to the requirements of de-escalation and turning the page on war. Very strange that it's almost like a bullet point list. Kuwait condemned, Jordan condemned, Qatar condemned, Egypt condemned. The same verb leading each paragraph. Then it talks about the IRGC and what they attacked. And then we have this statement that a diplomatic advisor to the president of the UAE, it's not even an official statement, it's not even condemning the attacks, just commented that the attacks on Qatari and Saudi commercial tankers shows that they're incapable of making peace in Iran. Okay? Why am I pointing that out? Because in UAE state media, we do have UAE condemns attack on Saudi tanker in Strait of Hormuz. The UAE has strongly condemned the Iranian attack on the Saudi oil tanker. In a statement, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs said the attack posed a serious threat to safety and security and condemned it. The UAE expressed full solidarity with Saudi Arabia and emphasized its support for all measures taken by the kingdom. The ministry added that the attack constituted a breach of UN Security Council Resolution 2817, which calls for freedom of navigation. Why does the Saudi media outlet mute the UAE condemnation of the attack? Why didn't it include them in the list of the other states? The reason I'm raising this question is not to be conspiratorial, but because right now there is some significant tension building between the UAE and Saudi Arabia. Some of it has to do with what's taken place in Yemen that I've reported on in a number of recent videos, that they were backing different anti-Houthi groups, and the UAE was backing a group that was actually also anti-Islamist, while the Saudis were backing an Islamist Muslim Brotherhood aligned group. The Saudis ended up taking control and pushing out the UAE group. There's a lot of tension in that whole area down there. The UAE is on Israel's side down in Somaliland. Saudi Arabia is more hedging. There's some real tension. And let's not forget OPEC, where the UAE pulled out of OPEC, which upset the Saudis. So there's some stuff going on between them right now. There's also this story that is developing where apparently bank transfers from Saudi Arabia to UAE have been held up, and it's unclear why. Bottom line is there's some very serious tensions brewing between the UAE and Saudi Arabia. And maybe I'm reading too much into this, but it seemed to me that leaving out the UAE from this article, about which literally like a listed all the countries that put out official statements condemning, and it lists Kuwait, Jordan, Qatar, Egypt, and just does not. Now, if they had not mentioned the UAE at all, that would have been very blatant. So they kind of left them to the bottom of the article like a buried lead, and they just mentioned that a diplomatic advisor to the UAE president made a comment that wasn't really a condemnation. So I'm just pointing that out. It's a side plot that's developing. We'll probably do a separate video on it soon about the UAE-Saudi tensions to dig down into them, tell that story a little bit more. But looks like things are ramping up, and we'll also watch this whole Omani situation as it develops, as hostilities ramp up. Let's see where the Omanis stand. Let's see what their statements look like. We'll be watching all of this very closely. Thanks for watching. Keep watching, keep sharing, and keep commenting. I read as many of the comments as I can. They really do matter. God bless.